We are in an incredibly dangerous world. I see we just had a Slovakian shot. God knows what's going to happen in the Balkans. We've got a war in Europe already. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got fighting in the South Red Sea. We've got a war in Sudan. Now a war in the Balkans maybe. I mean, we are in an incredibly dangerous world, and we have cut defence steadily for the last 14, 15 years. And I think that's a very silly and dangerous thing to do.
Royal Navy ships could be built abroad for the first time in history. The 162-year-old Harland and Wolf shipbuilding company, which built the Titanic, might shut down. It has faced financial problems for decades, but it looked like it would be saved by a £200 million taxpayer-backed support package. But this week, a defence source says that Jeremy Hunt is looking to reject the application. Admiral Lord West was First Sea Lord and Chief of the Naval Staff from 2002 to 2006. He joins us in the studio now. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Are you as bewildered by this as we were on reading it? Because only yesterday, Grant Shapps said that actually we were about to enter the kind of halcyon days of shipbuilding in this country. He talked about building 28 new ships and submarines. This seems to be sounding a very different tone.
The answer is, am I bewildered by it? Yes, I certainly am. When Harland and Wolf and Navantia won this bid, I was slightly surprised. They were called the Team Resolute. There was a Team UK bid, which had a number of UK firms, not including Harland, and they lost out in the bid. And we were told, well, actually, this will regenerate Harland. Navantia will only do a little bit of work. It'll primarily be done at Harland and Wolf in Northern Ireland. At the time, I felt a little nervous about it because I think Harland and Wolf at that stage had something like 70 employees and hardly any money whatsoever, and there was nothing there in the yard. And I thought, well, obviously the government knows something I don't know about this. Events since then have not reassured me. Navantia are good at building ships. They know how to build ships. But the whole point was, by saying that these were warships, the new Fleet Solid Support ships, was that they had to be built in UK yards. And as time's gone by, it's looked more and more as though Harland and Wolf are on very shaky ground financially.
So the market value is put at 20 million, which is not a lot if you're talking about great big building of ships, etc. But the £200 million taxpayer-backed support fund obviously would put it in a different league. I mean, presumably this is an argument, isn't it, between departments of government, and Jeremy Hunt may have looked at that and just thought, no, in a cost of living crisis, ahead of an election, when I've got to promise money elsewhere, I'm just not going to put it here.
I think what he's done is looked at this and said, well, why are no private equities putting money into this, into Harland? And the reason, I think, is because, as I say, their finances look pretty shaky. They've been acquiring certain things like Appledore Shipyard and other bits and pieces, places in Scotland where they could construct North Sea things. But there's no, what I call, bottom to the whole thing. It's not really solidly set. It's not got solid foundation. And that's what worries me. And the reason I'm really worried is these Fleet Solid Support ships are very crucial to the Navy. We absolutely need them. And this nonsense has all the smell of a procurement disaster, to be quite honest.
Right.
Of the type we had with Ajax and things like that.
OK. I was just going to say, how whiffy could that smell get?
Well, we're on the same wavelength, aren't we? It would be desperate if this thing fell apart and then either Navantia had to build them all, which has gone against what we'd hoped to do, but at least we'd get the ships, or they're going to have to come up with some other mechanism to ensure this happens. I mean, I would love to think that Harland and Wolf could be regenerated, be a big shipyard, able to do this. Harland and Wolf hasn't built a warship for a very long time. They'll rely a lot on Navantia and workers coming in. It just seems to me a bit of a mess, and that is a worry.
How much do you think nostalgia has played a part in this, if at all?
Well, I have to say, I'm honestly not sure. I mean, Harland has a history of being a very famous yard, of course. Indeed, Titanic was built there, wasn't it? Maybe that's not a good advert.
It's a weird boast, yeah.
I would love to know who exactly made the decision and why the decision was made to agree to go down this route. It just seems to me a high-risk one, even when it was made. And I just don't know. And the thing that really worries me is the Navy needs these ships. and this could upset the apple cart. And we don't want another procurement scandal where money gets pumped in, it's not built there, some of it's building, then Navantia has to come to the rescue and build it there. You can just see, you can see the sorts of things that could happen.
Yes, and they do have some precedent, don't they? Does it matter if our ships are built abroad? Is that something that attaches itself to too much nostalgia and patriotism?
Well, I certainly think that warships, we should be able to build our own warships, and these are now called warships because they are effectively warships. I mean, although the Royal Fleet Auxiliary will run them and things like that. And I think there is a sovereign, we have to have a certain sovereign capability in terms of resilience in what is, a really, really dangerous world. You can't rely necessarily on people one day who you thought were your friends, the next day they're not. And if you're having stuff built there and you're reliant on it, then you're poorly placed. And therefore, I think it is important. We've got to calculate quite carefully where do we need sovereign capability. I agree with that. So, for example, nuclear submarines, absolutely. And then you start running down in track things that maybe are not quite so crucial. But I think we do need to have a shipbuilding industry in this country that's able to do that. As Grant Chapp said, he was boasting away about all of this yesterday at the First Sea Lords Conference. And he was a little bit naughty with the actuality, actually. He mentioned the new amphibious ships, 6 of them. Well, they'd been announced some long time ago. I've asked question after question in the House saying, when is there going to be money for these things? It's already all announced. Well, he did announce there's money, but it's not money for 6, it's money for 3, and it's not the full build money. This is the design and that sort of money. Why hasn't he ordered all 6? He said it as if he had and put money in the programme.
Okay, that's interesting. So how did the audience react to that? Because that's a knowledgeable audience that he's saying those things to.
I think they're all scared stiff. They don't want to upset the Secretary of State of Defence in case they get even less money.
Okay, so everyone just politely nodded.
I'm sort of older and sort of scruffier than that, and I can sort of say things like this. I mean, now there's a joking aside. Whoever had written his script for him, he referred to the Royal Marine motto is per terra per marem par terra, Latin thing, but by land and sea, by sea and land. That's the Royal Marine motto. Well, when he was reading this from his scriptwriters, he got in a muddle and wondered why he'd said per mare. He said, "Oh, this is probably because I know Italian so well." Well, it's not. It's Latin. I mean, it was a complete bloody shambles, really. And I think he ought to keelhaul his scriptwriters actually in his briefers. I mean,
right.
So
or at least read it
confusing.
Through first. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
But I'm fascinated by that actually. Just the fact that people who have huge expertise like yourself do have to sit in a room and listen to somebody tell them what they already know, and presumably ahead of an election there is a desire to be seen to be selling kind of brand UK. That's involved in those figures there, isn't it?
Yes, and indeed, the fact that they have said they'll go to 2.5%, although they're not doing it till 2030, any increase in defence is needed. My goodness me, actually that's too little, too late. I mean, but you're not going to knock it because we know the battles with the Treasury, but. We are in an incredibly dangerous world. I see we've just had a Slovakian shot. God knows what's going to happen in the Balkans. We've got a war in Europe already. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got fighting in the South Red Sea. We've got a war in Sudan. Now a war in the Balkans maybe. I mean, we are in an incredibly dangerous world, and we have cut defence steadily for the last 14, 15 years. And I think that's a very silly and dangerous thing to do.
You have presumably been a master of strategy in your time, so shall we play some real-life departmental battleships? Who wins if it's Treasury versus Defence?
I'm going to come here again if I'm called a master of strategy. That's wonderful.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much for that. The bottom line is that the Treasury always wins. Treasury always wins. They will change their mind when suddenly there's a war, and that's too late for our nation. Let's try and stop a war by showing we've got the correct forces that we need, because people like Putin take notice of that. But the Treasury will always win. The Treasury's got the whip hand. It's inevitable. The Treasury lost the whip hand during the First World War, and then got it back again just in time to ensure that we had a Second World War, and they lost it again in the Second World War, and now and the Treasury will always have the whip hand. And of course, money. I'm not one of these stupid admirals who thinks, my goodness, we've got to have as many ships as possible, the hell with everything else. You've got to have a strong economy, trade, all of these things. It's all across all government departments. But I think we've lost sight of how important some aspects of defence are.
Yeah, but also, as you said at the beginning of the interview, you don't want to start awarding contracts that then get mired in something so difficult to unpick that you don't get the ships at all.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Admiral Lord West was First Sea Lord and Chief of the Naval Staff. And seriously, you're welcome back anytime.